Hey guys, in today's video, we'll be going over how to install a Flex Post for Flex Series freestanding applications. Before getting started, I want to go over a couple of things when installing a Flex Post. So the Flex Post is used wherever there are 90-degree turns within a layout of a project. Anytime there is a partition coming off the Flex Post, there will be a Flex stud attached to the post. If there are no partitions coming off the post, there will be nothing attached to the post. The next piece is the freestanding post stanchion. Now, I did a separate video on how to install the stanchions, so go ahead and check out that video. But as a quick overview, the purpose of the freestanding post stanchion is to create additional support and strength for freestanding applications. The stanchion will be installed wherever there is a Flex Post installed. Once we have the Flex Post constructed, it will slide over the stanchion. The post will then be plumbed up and put in the position where it needs to be. And from there, we'll attach the post to the stanchion, again, for that additional strength and support. Throughout this video, we'll go over how to construct the post as well as connect it to the stanchion. The first thing we need to do is determine the height of the Flex Post. To do this, take a look at your drawing. On the drawing, there will be an overall height listed. The goal is to be right at or close to that overall height listed on the drawing. The overall height will be to the top of the Flex Post. Now, there's a couple ways that you can determine the height of your post. But what I like to do is I like to set up a laser level at that overall height and then measure from the floor up to the laser line to get my post length. Now, something you may run into is your floors may be unlevel, so you want to make sure that you set that overall height at the lowest point in the floor and then cut your posts to that length. So just as an example, if my overall height was 96 inches, I set my laser at 96, and I'm at 96 inches on this side and 95 inches on this side due to the floor. We want to make sure that we cut that post to the 95 inches. The ultimate goal is to make sure that the top track for all partitions are perfectly level throughout the entire project. With the Flex Post cut, we can now determine the length of the Flex stud that is attaching to the Flex Post. Now, there will be two different situations to determine the length of the Flex stud. For all situations except for one, there will be a Flex track that will butt directly into the Flex Post at the top of the Flex Post. The stud will come up into the Flex track. Now, for situations with the Flex track, the length of the stud will be the length of the post minus 3/4 of an inch. The only other situation is for full height sliding door applications. Now, for those situations, we're going to use the Genesis stud, which is a thicker profile stud, at the top of the partition for the full height sliding door. Now, for this situation, the stud length measurement will be the length of the post minus 1 5/8 inches. This will allow the Genesis stud to butt directly into the post and have the Flex stud under the Genesis stud. Now, for this video, we're going to focus on the Flex track application. So again, the measurement is going to be the length of the post minus 3/4 of an inch. With the Flex stud cut, place it onto the Flex Post. When placing the stud onto the post, we want to make sure that the Flex stud is flush with the bottom of the post. And at the top of the post, we want to make sure the stud is 3/4 inches down from the top of the post. Again, what this is going to do is allow the Flex track to butt into the Flex Post and have the top of the Flex track flush with the top of the Flex Post, as that is the top of the partition. From there, we want to make sure to center the stud onto the post, and to do this, you can take small cut off pieces of flex trim and snap it into the stud. Once those are snapped in, the edges of the trim will be flush with the edge of the post. Once in place, we can then attach the stud to the post using 1.25" framing screws. Now when we're running our attaching screws, we want to make sure that the screw at the bottom of the post is at least 20 inches up from the bottom of the post. What this is going to do is going to allow us to slide the flex post over the stanchion and not have the attaching screw interfere with the stanchion. Once we have the stud and the post on the stanchion, we'll then run an attaching screw at the bottom of the post. At the top of the stud, we want to make sure to keep the attaching screw about 6 inches down from the top of the stud. This will allow the L bracket and the flex track to slide into the stud when we go to attach the bracket to the stud. From there, we'll add a screw somewhere in between the two attaching screws. Here's what it looks like with the attaching screws installed. Again, the first attaching screw is roughly 20 inches from the bottom of the post. The second screw is in between the top and bottom screw, and the top screw is roughly 6 inches down from the top of the post. You'll need to repeat this process for the other studs attaching to the flex post. Again, anytime there's a partition coming off the flex post, you'll have a flex stud attached to it. With the flex post built, we can now slide it over the stanchion. Now, if you run into a situation where the ceiling height's too short and you can't slide the post over the stanchion, you can slide the stanchion into the post and then place the post in the stanchion where they need to be, then anchor the stanchion into place. Once you have the post installed onto the stanchion, you can then use the adjustment bolts in the stanchion to plumb up the flex post. It's extremely important to make sure that the post is perfectly plumb, especially if you have any type of doors swinging off of the post or sliding into the post. To anchor the stud and the post to the stanchion, take a 1/4 inch drill bit and drill a hole through the stud only. The reason we're going to pre-drill the hole is to make sure that the stud doesn't try to pull away from the post when we run our attaching screw. You also need to make sure that the attaching screw is at least 6 inches up from the bottom of the post. This is also to prevent interference with the L bracket that will be slid into the flex stud. Once you have the hole drilled, we'll then use the supplied 2.5 inch framing screw to run through the stud, through the post, and into the stanchion. Now, the stanchion is made out of steel, so it might take a little bit extra time to get into the stanchion. Once you have the stud and post attached to the stanchion, I would then recommend making sure that your post is still plumb, and if you need to, make the proper adjustment to plumb up the post. The next step is to measure for the flex track at the top of the wall. Now, before you measure for the flex track, you need to make sure that you have a flex stud attached to the existing wall, or if you're running post to post, you'll need to make sure to have the post in place so you can take the measurement for the flex track. For the measurement for the flex track, you're going to measure from the existing wall over to the flex post, or you're going to measure from post to post. Once you cut the track, it's going to rest directly on the vertical flex studs. Before installing the flex track, you'll need to make sure to slide in the flex L brackets. You'll need to have one flex L bracket per vertical stud. This includes the L brackets on the ends for the studs attached to the post or the existing wall. Once you have the flex track ready, we're going to put it up on top of the wall and rest it onto the vertical studs. With the track on the studs, we'll need to slide the flex L bracket into the center of the flex stud. Once in place, we want to lift the track so that the track is flush with the top of the post. Once it's flush with the top of the post, we'll run 2 3/4 inch attaching screws through the L bracket and into the stud. This will make sure that the flex track remains in the correct position with the flex post. With the L bracket attached, you'll need to make sure there's a tight fit between the flex track and the post and tighten the set screw in the L bracket. With the set screw tight, this will complete the track to the post installation. Once you have one side completed, you'll move to the other side and repeat the process. You'll also need to make sure that this top track remains level across the entire opening. Before moving on, I want to quickly go over the situation where you have a full height sliding door and you have the Genesis stud as your top track for the sliding door. If you have that situation, it's the exact same as if you had the flex track up there. You're going to rest the Genesis stud on top of the vertical flex studs, slide your L bracket into the vertical flex stud, and then attach it with 3/4 inch attaching screws and tighten your set screw. Again, it's the same process, just a different profile of material. With the top track installed, we can now install the remainder of the framing. You can treat this as a standard installation as if you were attaching to the ceiling because now we have the top track in place. You'll need to take a look at your drawing to see if you have a door opening. If you have a door opening, you want to make sure to install your vertical studs first and then install your floor track. If you have a partition with solid panels all the way across, you'll need to put your flex track in across the entire opening and then install your vertical studs. But now we're going to go over one of the more important points of this installation with the installation of the flex track at the floor. One of the most important steps when installing the flex post and stanchion for freestanding application is the installation of the floor track. Because of the way the stanchion is designed, it holds the stud and the post up off of the floor, which causes the flex track to slip underneath the flex stud, putting it in the incorrect position. So what you need to do is you need to take your trim tags and install them into the stud on both sides of the stud. You'll want them at the bottom so that the track contacts the flex trim on both sides. What this will do is give you the correct spacing between the flex stud and the flex track. If it slips underneath there, you'll end up with a gap at the bottom between the track and the stud and the post. Having the trim tags installed will prevent this. So once you have your tags in place, you take your track, you'll butt it into the trim, and just slide in your flex L bracket into the center of the stud, and then attach the L bracket to the stud using the 3/4 inch attaching screws. If you have a door jamb coming off of the flex post, you won't need to put the trim tags in as the door jamb on the stud is already spaced correctly with the stanchion installed. So basically you'll just take your door jamb and you will install it directly onto the stud that's attached to the post. This will complete the video for the Flex Series freestanding post installation. If you have additional partitions, you're just going to repeat that same process for every partition coming off a flex post. This will be the end of the video. If you have any questions, please let us know.